Some scientists think ancient humans may have hibernated, not metaphorically. Actual hibernation, the same kind bears do, to survive winters so brutal that staying awake and active simply burned more calories than anyone could find. That theory is still debated, but it tells you something important. Surviving the cold wasn't about toughing it out. It took serious engineering. Here's exactly how it worked, and why some of it sounds almost unbelievable. Let's start with the basics. Humans evolved in warm African climates. Every part of our biology, thin skin, sparse hair, a body built to sweat heat away rather than trap it, is designed for heat, not cold. Compare us to a woolly mammoth or an Arctic fox, animals that evolved thick fur, fat layers, and circulatory systems specifically built to conserve heat. Humans got none of that. So when early humans pushed north into freezing landscapes, starting roughly 45,000 years ago, they weren't adapted for it at all. Biologically, they were exactly as vulnerable to cold as they are today. No fur, no hibernation instinct built into the body, nothing. What they had instead was something no other animal in that landscape had: the ability to build the adaptation themselves, using tools, knowledge, and cooperation instead of waiting on evolution. Fire was the foundation of everything else that followed. The obvious benefit is warmth. A fire lets you sit somewhere freezing and not freeze. But the less obvious benefit might be more important. Cooked food is dramatically easier for the body to digest, which means more usable calories extracted from every single meal. In brutal cold, calories aren't just nutrition, they're survival currency. Your body burns enormous energy just maintaining core temperature, and a body running a calorie deficit in freezing conditions doesn't have a long runway. Fire also extended the day itself. It let people stay active after dark, process food, repair tools, and simply exist somewhere that would otherwise become unsurvivable within hours of sunset. And there's a social dimension too. Gathering around a shared fire is one of the oldest forms of human community, a nightly ritual that reinforced the cooperation everything else depended on. Clothing came next, and it mattered more than people assume. Here's the part that's easy to get wrong. Simply draping an animal hide over your shoulders helps, but it doesn't actually solve the cold problem. Loose hides let wind in at every gap. They slip. They don't seal at the wrists, neck, or ankles, which are exactly the points where a body loses the most heat fastest. The real breakthrough was a tiny tool, the needle. Specifically, needles with a small-eyed hole, carved from bone, dated to around 45,000 years ago. That single invention changed everything downstream of it. It meant clothing could be tailored instead of draped, fitted sleeves, sealed seams, layered construction. The difference between a draped hide and a properly sewn garment is roughly the difference between mild protection and genuinely surviving sub-zero wind chill for extended periods. And here's a detail that still surprises people when they hear it. Evidence shows humans were using bear hides specifically for warmth for around 300,000 years. Not occasionally. Consistently, across hundreds of millennia, because bear hide outperformed most other available materials for insulation. That's 300,000 years of refined material choice, long before anyone wrote anything down. Shelter mattered just as much as clothing, and in some environments, it required a genuinely strange solution. In treeless, frozen landscapes, the kind found across much of Ice Age Europe, there was often no wood available to build with at all. So early humans built shelters out of mammoth bone, hide, and packed earth. Entire dwelling structures engineered from the skeleton of an animal large enough to kill a human in a single charge, repurposed into the exact thing that kept that same human alive through winter. Ribs and tusks formed structural supports. Hides stretched over the frame blocked wind. Packed earth sealed the gaps. This wasn't a desperate, last-resort improvisation. It was a refined, repeatable building technique used across multiple sites and generations, which tells you it worked well enough to be worth doing again and again. Here's the why behind all of this, the part that explains the whole system rather than just listing pieces of it. A shelter does more than block wind directly. It lets you light a fire safely indoors without that fire being extinguished by exposure, which means you actually conserve the body heat that fire generates instead of losing most of it to open air. It gives you a dry, defendable place to store food through winter, when nothing is growing and nothing is migrating through the area to hunt. Fire, clothing, shelter, and food storage weren't four separate solutions to four separate problems. They were one interconnected system. Remove any single piece, say shelter, and the value of having fire and clothing drops sharply because you're now exposed to wind and precipitation that undo most of what those other tools provide. This is why surviving the cold required all of it simultaneously, not one clever trick on its own. And food storage solved a problem that cold temperature alone doesn't fully explain. Winter doesn't just make the air dangerously cold, it removes the food supply almost entirely. Plants stop growing. Many animals migrate elsewhere or become far harder to track and kill in snow and ice. So communities stockpiled dried meat and fish during the warmer months, specifically to survive the stretch where nothing fresh was reliably available. This required planning months in advance, correctly estimating how much food a group would need to last an entire winter, and preserving it in a way that wouldn't spoil before it was needed. Hunting itself had to adapt to the cold environment too. Bringing down massive Ice Age animals like mammoths, bison, or wild horses required organized group strategy rather than individual effort, coordinated ambushes, and the use of natural traps like ravines or swampy ground where large animals could be immobilized and dispatched more safely. Eventually, the invention of projectile tools like the spear thrower, or atlatl, let hunters strike from a genuinely safer distance, multiplying the force and reach of a thrown spear instead of requiring dangerous close contact with an animal that could kill a person in one motion. Now, back to that hibernation theory from the very beginning, because it's worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as strange for its own sake. Researchers studying ancient bones from a site in Spain, known as the Pit of the Bones, found damage patterns consistent with seasonal metabolic stress, the kind of bone changes you'd expect if a body were shutting down most activity for extended periods, specifically to conserve energy, similar to patterns seen in hibernating animals. It's not proven, and many researchers remain skeptical. But if the theory holds up under further study, it means some ancient humans didn't just resist the cold through tools and effort. They may have temporarily gone dormant inside it, using a survival strategy borrowed from the same harsh landscape that was trying to kill them. The same basic trick used by bears, who, fittingly, were also providing the hides that kept other humans warm and active through the same winters. So, to recap, ancient humans had no biological advantage against extreme cold. No fur, no built-in hibernation instinct, nothing that would help on its own. What they had instead was an interconnected system, built piece by piece over tens of thousands of years. Fire for warmth and for unlocking more calories from food, sewn clothing made possible by a small but transformative bone needle, shelter built from whatever materials a landscape actually offered, even the bones of the animals hunted for food, organized group hunting to secure enough calories to survive, and food storage to bridge the months when nothing grew or migrated through. And in the most extreme cases, possibly, hibernation itself. They didn't out-evolve the cold. They out-engineered it, piece by piece, generation after generation, until surviving winter stopped being a matter of luck and became a matter of preparation.